Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Outing the whole thing. So it took them sending me to a cram class where they drew pictures so I could understand how everything went together, and it worked. So, it's a good thing. And
So you get your securities license.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Well, I'm a licensed banker at that point in time that has absolutely no power to do anything. And so Cindy, my manager, Cindy D, ended up moving into mortgage. And so she left the bank and went into a different company. And from there, I ended up with, one manager that was kind of a pushover. And honestly, she left me alone and I didn't need somebody to babysit me. And so things were still good. And then they hired what I can't even say kindly refer to as the blonde devil, because I don't like her. She was a mean human. And I really pride myself on being kind and giving and grateful. But I also don't accept a lot of drama and BS in my life. And so I really always told people, I'm like, I'm Switzerland. I have no opinion on what's going on with you. Just leave me alone so I can work and go home and be with my family. And she wanted to micromanage everything that I did. She told me I was not nice. I was overrated. And at this point in time, I was the number one banker in the state. So I had earned my stripes. They just don't give you that title. And
she was threatened by.
She was threatened by me. She's like, and I will never promote you. I'm like, listen here, sister. They already offered me your job and I turned it down. So leave me be. And so it got to the point where she actually put me in a back room and I wasn't allowed to talk to the public. Yeah. So Country came along. I didn't even know Country existed. And the office was right across the street from me at Wells Fargo. So I drove by the office every day on my way home and never noticed them because they were just kind of hidden in plain sight. And I am a believer that things happen for a reason and things are put into play for a reason. And Wells Fargo has a firewall that junk just does not get into our emails. I mean, the spam filter picks it right up. And Country had emailed me a recruiting email about working for them. And I'm like, I never thought about insurance. My grandfather was insurance. I think it's a terrible business, but I need a job. And so I emailed myself at home, went home for lunch, filled out the application really fast, hit submit, not knowing what was going to happen. And within 2 minutes, Vonnie Swanson, who was the recruiter at Country locally, called me and set up an appointment. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is real. I really don't want to do anything with insurance, but if I can get away from this lady, then I'm willing to do almost anything.
Like lifelong, right?
Yes. And so within 3 weeks, I was, had gone through the whole hiring process with Country and gave my notice. And the funny thing is that blonde devil had to present me with the Banker of the Year award that next day. And it was painful. It was so great. So I'm not a vengeful person, but man, that one felt good.
The best part about this is you were already gone.
Yes.
Right? Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? You were already gone. And then she had to hand that to you the next day. I mean, that is just.
Yeah. Heidi has left the building.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, oh my goodness, that is so perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing with the insurance stuff and, kind of moving forward to that, I mean, the way I saw my grandpa's business is really kind of important to the story as well. He owned a very successful practice in Tillamook. So downtown Tillamook, there's 4,000 people in Tillamook, still is 4,000 people in Tillamook 30 years later. But I would go in after school and I hated going in there because there was always this smoke ring that floated through the office. It was a long, skinny office with one window. It was brown walls, brown cabinets. There was papers and crap everywhere. He smoked. You could still smoke in your office. And so there was always this stanky stink in the office.
Right.
But he also loved to go to the Elks Club, which was across the street and for lunch. And so by the time I'd get there, in the afternoon after school, if I stopped by, my aunt worked for him. And so he would play poker with my other grandfather at lunch, and he'd be 3/4 tanked by the time I got there at 2 or 3. So, and I always kind of considered him a snake oil salesman to an extent. So to me, the insurance business was just dirty. It stank. It was drunk. It was cluttery with papers. But Tillamook County is basically a rainforest because we get 80+ inches of rain a year there. And he had the only in-ground swimming pool in the entire county that I knew of. And so I knew he was successful doing something.
Yeah.
And so that was the only thing that was remotely appealing about that. But that was at the very bottom of my list of anything I ever wanted to do with life.
Isn't that amazing how we have perceptions based on what we had experienced as a kid?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And then we go to work and we find out that the perception actually wasn't what our new reality is going to be.
For sure. And I mean, and the insurance industry has definitely shifted to what used to feel like a used car salesman type mentality to definitely not in all places, but with us, it's more of an advisory type position where they're advocates. We're trying to educate them. We're trying to make sure that their families are protected, right? And be that trusted person for them. And I do live in a small town. I mean, there's 40,000 people in our little town. And, I want to be the person that people know, like, and trust. And when they have a question, I want them to call me, not feel like they're going to get strong armed into, something they don't want.
Yeah, that's cool. So you go to work for Country.
Yep.
And we're talking about Country Financial. So you go to work for Country Financial.
Yes.
And at some point, we get into the wine business.
Oh, boy.
I love this.
Yes.
So how do we get into the wine business when we're selling insurance?
Okay. Well, the way Country Financial used to operate is that you were an employee agent for the first 5 years as you were building your business. So you had a salary, and then you got your first year commission, you had benchmarks. I almost quit year 3. My grandparents had both died. My dog had died. I had stepkids, that one in particular that didn't like me. I just, was running all over hell and back, and I just was melting. I couldn't handle it and almost quit. Like, I was looking for another job. And if it wasn't for one of the managers being in the right place at the right time to say the right thing and make me cry and tell me to basically pull my big girl pants up and stop making excuses, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, because I didn't know where I was going, but I was out.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Go back for a second, because this is a big life lesson.
It is a big life lesson.
So what happened? So you remarried, it sounds like.
I remarried. So I divorced. Yep. Had gotten divorced while I was at Wells Fargo.
Right.
Had remarried, and who was one of the best friends of the ex-husband, one of those dramatic stories.
Oh, wow.
But very happy, very, very happy. In fact, have an incredible partner now with my husband. But yeah, about year 3, the benchmarks were hard. Insurance is hard. Yeah. And I just was floundering. Like, the death of my grandmother was really hard on me. And then my grandpa died a couple months later, and then my dog died. And it just was just this revolving door of negativity and darkness. And it just snowballed. And my big boss at the time, Tim Harris, who is an incredible human, he's second in command basically with Country Financial now, and has moved out of Oregon, is in Illinois, where headquarters is. Loved to put on annual kickoffs that were fun. And so every year had a theme. And this year was the game In It to Win It. I can't remember if that was a Drew Carey game show or Guy Fieri, one of them. And I am very extroverted during the day, but I get embarrassed really easily. And I'm very introverted as soon as I leave my office, and I'm not very social. I'm terrible to invite to parties. Mm-hmm. And so you had to qualify to be part of these games, quote unquote. And then from there, then you had to get drawn to be part of the game.
Right.
And I had qualified for 2 different spots, and I had been watching this stuff go on all day. I mean, people had tissue boxes hooked to their tushes, and they had to, wiggle their butts to get the ping pong balls out and other things. And I was just mortified that I might get pulled to come up, and I did. I got pulled, and I'm like just dying inside, horribly dying inside. And I get up there, and they paired us with a manager that we didn't know, so it wasn't our manager, it was one of the other managers in the state. And so I got paired with Bill Miller, who was from Bend, and the game was announced, and it was pulling tissues out of a box, and it was me and 6 men. And I'm like, I got this. I'm a mom. I can pull tissues like nobody's business.
Right.
And so buzzer goes off, hits go, and I have both wads of tissue in my hand probably within 30 seconds. And the men are just one by one, and so won an iPad or whatever it was, that the prize was. And, he says, congratulations. I go, go home, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I had never met the man until that day. And he called me at 9 a.m. the next morning, and he's like, Heidi, this is Bill Miller. He's like, how are you this morning? I'm like, fine. And he's like, so what's your problem? And I'm like, what? And he's
Excuse
like,
me?
what's your problem? He's like, you're a great producer, and all of a sudden you're in the toilet. What's your problem? And I started to cry. And I mean, and it was blunt, just like
confrontational with you.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sensitive, and I was really, really sensitive at the time, and I started to cry.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, so tell me what's going on, because obviously there's something with your life going on right now, and we need to get to the end of it. And so I started blubbering my story of all these things that had died and what's going wrong, and we're broke, and blah blah blah. And he's like, okay, he's like, those are excuses. He's like, we are going to move on, because you're too good for us to lose, and you need to pull together, basically. And I'm going to be in Portland in 2 weeks. I want you to meet me at this restaurant. We're going to restructure your business. And so I met him, unbeknownst to my manager, which they had this pretty hot and heavy rivalry. And I just couldn't tell my boss that this was what was going on. And he spent 3 hours with me that night going through products and education, and like just reestablishing my confidence and giving me some tips and tricks. And honestly, without him, I would never be sitting where I'm at right now.
And what's his name again?
Bill Miller.
Bill Miller. Well, shout out to Bill. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've told him a few times, how grateful I am. And he just kind of shrugs it off and kind of moves on to the next day, which is great. Tim Harris also but I've had really great management and support, with country. So I can't down on anybody, whatever, but that was the pinnacle moment.
Illinois.
What's that?
He flew out from Illinois?
No, Bill was in Central Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah. This was all Oregon. Things are a little bit different now, in that they have us kind of more in like geographical sections versus by state. But yeah, at the time everything was by state. So we were all, in Oregon, all in the same room. So yeah.
How far did he travel to come see you for that 3 hours?
3 hours. It takes 3 hours from Bend to Portland.
Okay. So he comes up, he takes him 3 hours to get up there.
Yep.
He sits with you for 3 hours.
Yep. Buys me dinner.
And basically shares with you. So let me back up for a second. So it sounds like he could work on his bedside manner a little bit.
That's just his personality, and you take it or leave it.
So it's just how he rolls.
Yeah. And honestly, it was what I needed. I needed kind of that shock and awe factor to kind of pull my head out, and also needed some positivity and some reinforcement of that what I was doing the right things, and I was good at what I did. But I just had hit a big bump, and I was letting the bump swallow me at that point in time. And I just didn't have the strength to pull out of it. My husband, bless his heart, didn't know what to do either, because he's not in that industry. And so, well,
it's hard, right? When you see your spouse suffering, it's hard to figure out what the solution is. And let's be honest, I've been married for 30 years as of last month. Okay. And there are a lot of times in the last 30 years that she didn't want solutions.
Yeah. It's a very valid point.
Right? She just wanted to vent.
Yeah.
So, okay. So That is unbelievably awesome. I am
Yeah.
super proud of Bill Miller. I'm super proud of you because you have to be active in that situation, right? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So
Yep.
that's a big deal, right? And that
It
three
definitely
hours,
set the
it sounds like,
trajectory
was
different.
completely transformational.
Yeah. 100% on so many levels. And it, kind of leads me to it, where I went from being an employee to then into the career status, which is an
Yeah.
independent status. You're still a captive agent with Country Financial, but you get to call your shots a
Yeah.
little bit more. And I knew from the day that I started that if I got to that point, I wanted to specialize in something. I wanted to be known for something. I wanted my own niche.
Yeah.
And I all along just thought it was going to be dairy farming. I mean, I know cows and I know dairy farming. I can go in as a voice of reason and actually know what the equipment is and what and the milk comes out of and all those good things. And and that was something that was a very very important to my dad, when people would come to the farm, that they knew the business.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know the business, he didn't have time for them.
Yeah.
Things needed cleaned and fixed and milked and whatever else. And so when I got to that point, I'm like, okay, well, dairy's not an option. And we are in wine country here. So the Willamette Valley is known for its vineyards and its world-class wine. I didn't drink wine. I didn't like it. I live in the middle of one of the most incredible AVAs, which is an American Viticultural Association. So it is a definition of a specific geographical area that is unique. And had never really drank wine because, to be honest with you, it really scared me. I didn't understand it. And
Right.
I'm a do it right or don't do it at all person. And if the tasting notes say I needed to taste, cooked strawberries and tobacco, and I didn't, I'm like, okay, I'm out. This isn't for me. And so I was a beer drinker, loved craft beer and IPAs and that kind of stuff. And so I apparently had been whining loud enough about losing all my vineyards because we couldn't do the wine. We could do the vineyards on the farm side, but we didn't have a policy or any options to do the actual winery, which was alcohol based with liquor liability and things like that. And so, I heard through the grapevine that Country was developing, because we write all of our own policies. Yeah. So we don't broker out anywhere. It's all within Country's walls, which is why I feel like it makes us special in a lot of different respects. But I knew there was a brewery policy and a wine policy and a cider policy coming down the pipeline. And I was going to hop on that train and I was going to ride it to Cashtown, basically. Right. And unbeknownst to me, the wine stuff came first. And I'm like, well, and I couldn't get an answer on when the beer was coming because I'd already established that market, those relationships. And they're like, yeah, it could be a year, it could be 3 years. We just don't know. It has to be approved by the state, blah, blah, blah. Wow. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, wine it is. And so I called my professor who was still teaching at Linfield, who had helped develop the Northwest Wine Institute at Linfield, and kind of ran the idea by him. I'm like, what do you think? And, is there a niche? Is there a market for this? And he's like, oh, yeah. It's right at the infancy stage of the Willamette Valley with wine niches in the professional and the business world. He's like, but you need to talk to Ellen Britton. She was the head of the wine program at Linfield at the time. Mm-hmm. And so she agreed to meet blindly, and we had coffee, and she spent 2 hours with me telling me the pain points of the insurance world and what was out there at this point in time and what they needed and what I needed to know. And so took all the notes, pages and pages of notes, and went back to my underwriting team. And I'm like, this is what we need to fix. This is what I need to know. And how I'm going to explain to these clients how we're going to do things differently. Right. And went back to her 2 weeks later. I'm like, okay, I've got answers. And with that, she's like, you need to go through the immersion program that Linfield was offering at the time. So it was a 12-week program every Tuesday and Thursday through the summer, which I like my summers. Yeah. From 8 to 5, basically. And we started with dirt and the history of wine in France and around the world, worked up through vineyard management, pest control, winemaking, the enology part of it, and into the business world. And then ended with a celebration at the International Pinot Noir celebration, which is in McMinnville, which winemakers from all over the world bring their Pinot here and showcase it. And it's an amazing, amazing event. And I got to be part of that. And what scared me in the wine industry was the wine. And what I learned in the program was You drink what you like. And if you don't like it, it's okay. And you can move on, and you don't need to swirl it, and you don't need to sniff it, and you don't need to dissect it and figure out what the flavors are unless you want to, because some people love that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have that palate. But what I really picked up from it was the stories of these people are amazing. They're not these snooty, snobby, elitist people that Hollywood has us believing they are. They're farmers and creatives.
They're real people. Yeah.
They're great people. Yeah. Most of them. I mean, every group has their, outliers, but for the most part, everybody I've met in the wine industry has just been a phenomenal human.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you become an expert in the wine insurance business.
Yes.
And so is that currently what you're doing? I mean, are you currently involved in that particular specialty?
Yeah, we do everything in my office. So I actually have an office of 6 now. So I have 5 girls that work for me. Was not intentional to have an all-girl office, but it just worked out really great.
Right.
My specialty is craft beverage. So mostly wine. I work mostly with winemakers in the Pacific Northwest. So Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, and other states I can do as well if we're licensed there. Okay. Farming, small business, restaurants are kind of like my major focus. But I still do everything. Oh, and life insurance. Life insurance is definitely in my wheelhouse as well.
You still do the craft beer thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yep. I do it all.
Yeah.
I have several cideries up in Washington that I work with. I have a couple breweries that I work with, but I've gotten known and a reputation in the wine industry. And a lot of that is because of my podcast, which you didn't know I had until just a little while ago.
Yeah. I didn't know you had a podcast.
Yeah.
So tell us about the podcast.
So the podcast is called Wine Crush, and it is the stories of the wine industry. So there's really a 2-part mission to it, and it actually found me. I did not find it. I was not comfortable in front of a camera or a mic, and I definitely did not want to be on the radio. Yeah. And it just, the executive director of the Portland Radio Project just happened to pick up one of my advertisements and wanted some help developing a wine podcast. And I just assumed she meant that I was going to host it. And so I went in with that attitude, and she's like, okay, so we're going to talk about wine insurance on this. I'm like, oh, hells no, we're not talking about that. Nobody ever listened. It's so boring. I'm like, but what I did fall in love with were all these great personalities and bringing these myths of the wine industry to an end. Yeah. Like, this is not only for, drinking on a special occasion or with a filet mignon or a great piece of salmon, which great, by the way, but it's about telling the stories of these small producers, particularly. So Oregon has about 1,500 wineries, and there's a lot of noise just because there's just so much to choose from. Yeah. And so my goal was not only to bring non-wine drinkers like myself to the forefront and encourage them to drink wine, but then also go seek out these small mom and pop, medium-sized producers that don't have these massive marketing budgets, aren't corporate, have these great stories, are doing really cool things, and bringing some joy and hopefully some extra money to their pockets by selling some wine.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So we're 7 seasons deep. We just started the 7th season. We've done, I don't know, well over 125 interviews, I think. Yeah. And maybe 88 episodes. I don't really know.
Congratulations. That's really
Thank you.
Cool. That's really
it's good stuff.
I'm excited for you.
Thanks.
So is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think the podcast is kind of the topper of the Sunday, so to speak. I mean, it really has been a great marketing and business tool because the relationship is getting created first. Yeah. So I don't go in slinging insurance because nobody wants to talk about insurance. I can count on all of my fingers how many people will tell me I'm good when you mention the word insurance. I'm like, I didn't even say anything about insurance. I want to talk about your wine. Right. So, I would say that that's a big encouragement for me and just how I've really created my business and where the success is coming from was giving and then also developing that relationship. I don't expect anything in return from any of these people. I just want to tell the world about how amazing they are. And we are listened to internationally at this point in time. So it's really cool seeing people from Portugal and Japan and other places, seeing these stories, and then hopefully traveling to Oregon and the Northwest to try these amazing wines.
So you do insurance in Washington State, Oregon State.
Mm-hmm.
Any other
Idaho.
states?
Yep. Oregon, Washington, Idaho,
Okay.
Arizona, Nevada, Illinois, and Alabama.
Wow.
Yeah, that should have been 9. There's 9 of them. So
Kind of a
I wish it was in
cross-section.
Hawaii, because then I could write off my trip to Maui to go up to the winery up there. But
I love that. Let's do
yeah,
that.
yeah, not yet. We're not there yet, but who knows?
You'll get there. I got faith
Eventually.
in you. You'll get there.
Yeah,
So what's the name of the podcast again?
it's called Wine Crush.
Wine Crush. Okay.
Yep.
We'll look it up and we'll put a link to it in your description. Also, we'll put a link to your website in there too.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. We're just really trying to put a different face and a different, spin and feel specifically on insurance and how people look at it. So yeah, we're here to be that person and to explain why you need to do what you need to do and make it make sense, because without it make sense, insurance reads a lot like Latin. And most people don't understand it. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Heidi Moore, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. This was
I
wonderful.
thoroughly enjoyed our time together. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.